Because here in the concluding words it says Rama Akadashi. Okay. All right. So it is a special Akadashi for those who didn't hear. It is Rama or Rama Akadashi. We'll see. And it is the day in which Srila Prabhupada finished the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So we can read his concluding words to the Chaitanya Charitamrita. We may read that verse, but first we're going to read this. Today, Sunday, November 10th, 1974, corresponding to the 10th of Kartik, Chaitanya era, 488, the 11th day of the dark fortnight, the Rama or Rama Akadashi, we have now finished the English translation of Sri Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita in accordance with the authorized order of His Divine Grace, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Goswami Maharaj, my beloved eternal spiritual master, guide, and friend. Although according to material vision, His Divine Grace, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada passed away from this material world on the last day of December, 1936, I still consider His Divine Grace to be always present with me by His Vani, His words. There are two ways of association, by Vani and by Vapu. Vani means words and Vapu means physical presence. Physical presence is sometimes appreciable and sometimes not, but Vani continues to exist eternally. Therefore, we must take advantage of the Vani, not the physical presence. The Bhagavad Gita, for example, is the Vani of Lord Krishna. Although Krishna was personally present 5,000 years ago and is no longer physically present from the materialistic point of view, the Bhagavad Gita continues. In this connection, we may call to memory the time when I was fortunate enough to meet His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada, sometime in the year 1922. Srila Prabhupada had come to Calcutta from Sridham Mayapur to start the missionary activities of the Gaudiya Math. Yeah. Prabhupada's, yeah. He was sitting in a house at Altadanga when, through the inducement of an intimate friend, the late Sriman Narendranath Mulik, I had the opportunity to meet His Divine Grace for the first time. I do not remember the actual date of the meeting, but at that time I was one of the managers of Dr. Bose's laboratory in Calcutta. I was a newly married young man, addicted to Gandhi's movement, and dressed in khadi. Fortunately, even at our first meeting, His Divine Grace advised me to preach the cult of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in English in the Western countries. Because at that time I was a complete nationalist, a follower of Mahatma Gandhi's, I submitted to His Divine Grace that unless our country were freed from foreign subjugation, no one would hear the message of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu seriously. Of course, we had some argument on this subject, but at last I was defeated and convinced that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's message is the only panacea for suffering humanity. I was also convinced that the message of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was then in the hands of a very expert devotee, and that surely the message of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would spread all over the world. I could not, however, immediately take up his instructions to preach, but I took his words very seriously, and I was thinking of how to execute his order. But I took his words very seriously, and I was always thinking of how to execute his order, although I was quite unfit to do so. In this way, I passed my life as a householder until 1950, and when I retired from family life as a vanaprastha with no with no companion, I loitered here and there until 1958 when I took sannyas. Then I was completely ready to discharge the order of my spiritual master. Previously, in 1936, just before His Divine Grace passed away at Jagannath Puri, I wrote him a letter asking what I could do to serve him. In reply, he wrote me a letter dated December 13, 1936, ordering me in the same way to preach in English the cult of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as I heard it from him. So I'll just stop there and continue, but maybe speak a little bit. Om Jnanativedandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Kam Karivachalam Pangam Langai Tegirim Yat Kripatamaham Vande Shri Gurun Dilitaranam Vancha Kaptribhishcha Kripa Sindhu Bhevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gauda Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he said that there'd be a time when the people of the world would learn Bengali just so they could read the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Now, of course, Prabhupada translated it into English, but the Bengali language is very sweet. So still, who knows, a lot of people may want to learn it still, so they could read the original language in which Chaitanya Charitamrita was written. But whatever the case, whether one reads the original Bengali Chaitanya Charitamrita or the English Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is absolutely wonderful and a great gift to the world, a unique gift to the world, in which there's no comparison in literature, and that it describes extreme levels of Krishna consciousness that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is experiencing, things that people wouldn't even imagine, certain levels of ecstasy in which external Mahaprabhu would show external characteristics unimaginable for people, which is in the Antya Lila. So yeah, it is absolutely special that Srila Prabhupada, he gave us the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and we should be eternally grateful. And it says that if one wants to repay the debt of the spiritual master, Prabhupada wrote that to devotees in Los Angeles. He said that if you want to repay the debt of the spiritual master, then you should preach vigorously all over the world. So it's a fallen time, it's a fallen world, and of course people sometimes they say, oh, it's getting better, a lot of people are becoming vegetarians and whatever, there's a yoga movement and people are doing meditation, etc., right? That's true. So that's on one hand. And then on another hand, we see that there's still a lot of demonic influence. And the demonic influence is becoming worse. So yeah, there's some good influence and people becoming more interested, but the demonic influence is still there, it's becoming worse. So you have these two things happening at the same time. Just like our Bhakta Alex here, he asked me if I wanted to see a video of a modern musician that's very popular. The video has 50 million views, and that wasn't his most popular song. So, and he showed me a picture of the guy. The guy looked like a like a demon, or like a monster, like a ghost. He just looked really bad. Like, just, I'm sorry to say, but just. He's from America, yeah. And he's about 18 years old, and he's a rapper. And so he asked me if I wanted to see the video, and I said, well, that's all right, I think I'll pass. But maybe you could just tell me, in essence, what he's singing about, what's going on in that video. And the video is entitled, like, the main, you could say, what is it called, like, the theme, but the chorus, the main chorus of the song is, I kill people. Yeah. And I said, oh, what goes on in the video? And of course, what goes on is, there's women there, and there's, he's smoking pot, and there's also guns. He has guns, So it's absolutely horrible. I mean, and he's popular. He's popular. A lot of people are liking him. And there's another guy like that, similar guy. So, and I was just, because sometimes, in the old, I don't want to get into all the history of, all this, but in old, music, rap, for some years ago, they would mention stuff like that, but it would be kind of it would just be part of the song, it wouldn't be like the chorus. That's really, crazy to have the chorus as that. So you could see that the demonic influence is there, and it's getting worse. And somehow or other people are liking that. I don't understand why. Yeah, lower modes. Yeah, the lower modes. And then we wonder, people wonder, oh, hey, why is there so much violence, and why are the, people going to the schools and, shooting and this and that? And, well, you have songs like that. What do you expect? So, of course, government, in a real, you could say, Krishna-conscious government, they would check such things. They would never allow that. Anything close to that, somehow or other, our government allows that. So whatever the case is, the influence is there, and therefore Srila Prabhupada said, preach, 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 somehow or other. Preach by example, preach from the books, do something to preach, help the preaching movement. In this way, some people could get some, real knowledge, some real, and not be subjected to such things like I was just describing. It's really bad. So, and this is what Srila Prabhupada did. He understood that the suffering of humanity, and he understood that he should preach, and that's exactly what he did. This is part of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So, and here he mentions an interesting point about the spiritual master. He says, my beloved eternal spiritual master, guide, and friend. So yeah, the spiritual master is our beloved eternal spirit. He's our spiritual master and our guide and our friend. So, so yeah, that's an important thing to think about. The position of the spiritual master. And the spiritual master, ultimately, every one of us are meant to see everyone else as our gurus. And people are teaching us indirectly, they're inspiring us indirectly and directly to surrender to Krishna. So in that way, everyone's our guru. Because there's some people who inspire there's some people who inspire us to surrender to Krishna, right? Directly. Our guru, certain Vaishnavas, right? And then there's some people who indirectly inspire us. And how do they do that? Well, we look at them and we go, oh wow, I don't want to be like that. I don't want to be like that person. That person's struggling, suffering, miserable. I don't want to be like that, so therefore I should surrender to Krishna. Or there's certain people who teach us, you could say, certain lessons that help us, become better persons, become better devotees. And then there's certain people who teach us certain lessons, you could say, that we think, okay, I better not be like that. They're teaching us what not to do. So in that way, every single person within our life could be seen to be a guru or a teacher. But the problem comes is that when somebody's not open, somebody's too bogged down, too they're being pushed down by pride, then they can't see that. They can't see any of the gurus surrounding them. That's the problem. So in this case, Srila Prabhupada's talking about his guru, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who initiated him. And in that wonderful relationship. But interesting enough, Prabhupada only met his guru, what, like 10 times? Something like that. So he only met him not that much. I mean, he didn't actually meet with him that much. But as Prabhupada's saying here that we have to follow the instructions of the spiritual master. And it's not so much of the physical presence. Because some people they may criticize modern ISKCON and the modern gurus in the sense that they accept so many disciples. And how do they have so much time for all these disciples? Right? They stop by once a year, if that, and then they're hitting the road, jumping in the plane and going somewhere else. So what's up with that? How is that authentic? How is that traditional? How is that good? How is that moral? Some devotees have issues with this. And if you closely look at Rupa Goswami's Nectar Devotion, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu Srila Prabhupada's translation and summary study, it says that one should not accept many disciples who are unfit, means materialistic, disciples. Why? Because they're just not qualified. There's some insincerity there, so therefore you shouldn't accept them. But interesting enough, in the same section where that is being described, Prabhupada says, but the spiritual master is merciful, so he accepts. He takes the risk and he accepts an unqualified person with the idea that he could hopefully bring them up. So that is the case. Of course, that is the case. So, but from a traditional perspective, you could say, especially we're talking about traditional Indian, how it was all functioning. I mean, a guru, a sannyasi, or a lot of them are sannyasis, happen to be sannyasis. They would be traveling through town, and they'd meet some devotee and may make a few disciples there, and then continue with their travels. And if you really look far back, I mean, they didn't have any trains and cars and this and that, so who knows if he'll ever come back? You know what I mean? Who knows if he'll ever come back? So the idea that a spiritual master has to spend a lot of physical time with a disciple, Srila Prabhupada never stressed that. And Srila Prabhupada himself didn't do that. He was traveling so much. And specifically, Srila Prabhupada would stress, you have to follow instructions, you have to follow instructions, you have to follow instructions. And we have to see that it's not just the Diksha Guru, there's the Shiksha spiritual masters, the Shiksha Gurus that are there, who are working with the Diksha Guru. So that's an important thing. And he's mentioned here, like Bhagavad Gita, Krishna, he appeared and then he was gone. He wasn't here for that long, right? What, 125 years? And still people can get his association. Prabhupada says here, the Bhagavad Gita continues. People are still getting the association of Krishna. So we have to learn this lesson that we have to take shelter of the instructions of the spiritual master. The spiritual master, specifically the Diksha and the Shiksha spiritual master. I mean, everybody has a time. Everybody has a time limit. It's stamped on their forehead, invisibly, that, on such and such date you were born, and such date you will leave your physical body. So the Shiksha, the Diksha, all the gurus, they come and they go. But what stays is their instructions. So that's an important point. All right, so we'll finish the concluding words. After he passed away, I started the fortnightly magazine Back to Godhead sometime in 1944 and tried to spread the cult of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu through this magazine. After I took sannyas, a well-wishing friend suggested that I write books instead of magazines. Magazines, he said, might be thrown away, but books remain perpetually. Then I attempted to write srimadbhagavatam. Before that, when I was a householder, I had written on srimadbhagavad and had completed about 1,100 pages. But somehow or other, the manuscript was stolen. It's amazing they stole a manuscript. I mean, out of all the things they could steal. I mean, they could steal a watch, this or that. They stole the manuscript of Bhagavad Gita. In any case, when I had published Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, and 3 volumes in India, I thought of going to the USA by the mercy of His Divine Grace. By the mercy of His Divine Grace, I was able to come to New York on September 17th, 1965. Since then, I have translated many books, including Srimad Bhagavatam, the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, a summary, and many others. In the meantime, I was induced to translate Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita and publish it in an elaborate version. In his leisure time in later life, His Divine Grace Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur would simply read Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. It was his favorite book. He used to say that there would be a time when foreigners would learn the Bengali language to read the Chaitanya Charitamrita. The work on this translation began about 18 months ago. Now, by the grace of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and His Divine Grace Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, it is finished. In this connection, I have to thank my American disciples, especially Shriman Pradyumna Das Adhikari, Shriman Nitai Das Adhikari, Shriman Jayadvaita Das Brahmachari, and many other boys and girls who are sincerely helping me in writing, editing, and publishing all these literatures. You were involved, right? Okay. I think that His Divine Grace, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, is always seeing my activities and guiding me within my heart by His words. As it is said in Srimad Bhagavatam, Tene Brahma Hridaya Adi Kavaye, spiritual inspiration comes from within the heart, wherein the Supreme Personality of Godhead and His Paramatma feature is always sitting with all His devotees and associates. It is to be admitted that whatever translation work I have done is through the inspiration of my spiritual master, because personally I am most insignificant and incompetent to do this materially impossible work. I do not think myself a very learned scholar, but I have full faith in the service of my spiritual master, His Divine Grace, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. If there is any credit to my activities of translating, it is all due to His Divine Grace. Certainly, if His Divine Grace were physically present at this time, it would have been a great occasion for jubilation. But even though He is not physically present, I am confident that He is very much pleased by this work of translation. He was very fond of seeing many books published to spread the Krishna consciousness movement. Therefore, our society, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, has been formed to execute the order of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and His Divine Grace, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. It is my wish that devotees of Lord Chaitanya all over the world enjoy this translation, and I am glad to express my gratitude to the learned men in the Western countries who are so pleased with my work, that they are ordering in advance all my books that will be published in the future. On this occasion, therefore, I request my disciples, who are determined to help me in this work, to continue their cooperation fully, so that philosophers, scholars, religionists, and people in general all over the world will benefit by reading our transcendental literatures, such as Srimad Bhagavatam and Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports to Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, dated November 10th, 1974, at the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust, Hare Krishna Land, Juhu, Bombay. So my Guru Maharaj happened to be here at the time, and he said that because they would go up to Prabhupada's room every morning and knock on the door so they could go on the morning walk. So then they went up there and they knocked on the door, and then whoever was the servant secretary, they opened the door. At first, the door wasn't open. I think, oh, is everything all right? So then the secretary came out, and he said that he was very excited, and then Prabhupada said that, he said, oh, Prabhupada just finished a Chaitanya Charitamrita, and he's very excited, very happy, and he said all the devotees should have a big feast made, for celebration, like a jubilation, so a Kaddashi feast, I guess. So yeah, Prabhupada, with great effort, he went through he went through to translate and to comment on Chaitanya Charitamrita, the Bhagavatam, and so many other books. And if we don't read the books, then it's actually being offensive to him. And so yeah, we should read the books as much as possible. And whatever we say, practically, should be backed up from what is in the books. Because if we are claiming to be representatives of a particular tradition, then we should quote, the books in that tradition, not quote whatever. I mean, if we're as ultimate authorities, if we're quoting, Shankaracharya, if we're in a Vaishnava sect and we're quoting Shankaracharya as an ultimate authority, quoting his impersonal, ideas, then that's obviously not good. So, and Prabhupada said about his books, he said that drops of water wear away stone. So he said, this is what happened with my books, that every day I would do something. I would write, or dictate every day. And in this way, so many books were manifested. And he said that about him writing his books, he said that, yeah, nobody forced me, to get up early in the morning. I like it. I have a taste. And that's why people like my books, because I actually have a taste. And, whatever's coming out is... So yeah, we should study Chaitanya Charitamrita as much as possible. Somehow or other, devotees, or it seems like sometimes they read Bhagavad Gita, and then they try to slug it through Bhagavatam. And then sometimes Chaitanya Charitamrita is just kind of like, it's there, but kind of not there. It's like in the background somewhere. And that's unfortunate because it's such a wonderful book. So again, drops of water wear away stones. So even if we just read one verse of Chaitanya Charitamrita a day and one purport, it's better than thinking, okay, I'll get to it eventually. Because it's such a wonderful book. Because after all, it's Chaitanya Mahaprabhu who came and who is giving us what we have now through him and then through all of his, all the devotees coming after him. It's not that what Krishna came to give, right, in the Bhagavad Gita, most of what we're doing nowadays is actually, of course, it's based on that, on the Bhagavad Gita, but if just imagine if Chaitanya Mahaprabhu didn't come, we would be operating in a whole different fashion. Means our spiritual lives would be completely different. Who knows? We may not be sitting here. So Mahaprabhu, he gave a very special gift, and that is described in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So we should definitely read it. And if some people say I don't have time to read, then okay, fine, get the audio book. Get lectures of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Do something to meditate on Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It has that verse, right? It's in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. It says, for one who remembers, for one who forgets Lord Chaitanya, very easy things become difficult. And for one who remembers Lord Chaitanya, very difficult things become easy. So if we remember Lord Chaitanya, things that we think are difficult, like becoming Krishna conscious or whatever other spiritual aspirations we have. If we forget Lord Chaitanya, then it remains difficult, practically impossible. But if we remember Lord Chaitanya, then it becomes very easy. So in order to remember Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we have to read Chaitanya Charitamrita, listen to audiobooks, listen to lectures, somehow or other meditate like that. So this is the Akadashi in which Srila Prabhupada finished the English translation of Chaitanya Charitamrita. So it's a nice day to celebrate. So does anyone have any comments or questions about anything? Yes, Triveda Prabhu.
Oh yeah, the spirit of the Chaitanya Charitamrita is really what this movie is about. You read the Adi Lila, chapter 7, which was the first chapter that came out. Prabhupada had us print that Adi Lila chapter 7 before any of the other books back in 1974 or 3. And then the Adi Lila came out and read through the rest of the book. And why? Because that chapter is all about the Panchatattva. So there's a wonderful section at the beginning describing how the Panchatattva, the logic and emotion, and it broke off in the stars above God, spread it everywhere, and so on. And then there's a long section describing what you can do with Bhakti and the Saraswati, and the purification of the Mayavad philosophy, what is so you really get a move for what this movement is about, that we should be by the time we got foundational philosophy and Krishna, but what you can do is enacting right now, or right now, and just one of the things, just looking at this, I forgot the final verse in the whole PC is like the sweetest verse is Vadimabhavasa the Bhagavatam Sotason Nada Rasam Garodam Bom Realize devotees are like bumblebees maddened by their own mellows of Krishna's lotus feet. The scent of those lotus feet perfumes the entire world. Who is the realized soul who can give them up? That's like the last verse, except for the final verse that just says, it's finished on the stage. So they just said in the movie, that's where you see it's entire process.
Yes. So some people, they, in the past and, probably right now and in the future, they may criticize whatever, so many criticism, but they criticize like ISKCON. They say, oh, well, you can't really reach, high platforms if you're in ISKCON, this and that. But it's interesting because, okay, that means there's the whole Chaitanya Charitamrita, which is such a high literature from Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. And then not only are there Srila Prabhupada's purports and explanations, but a lot of it, Srila Prabhupada is quoting Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And then, even then, a lot of it's also quoting Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So where are these people going? I mean, they want to, so they're, what is it called? You're skating on thin ice and sort of things. So, but anyways, yeah, Chaitanya Charitamrita. Anyone have any other question or comment? All right, Chaitanya Charitamrita ki jai.